Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, so the reason we don't have a court reporter is, I think I've been told, it's on account of the partial shutdown and the shortage of funds, but I had wanted a court reporter, but we have to do this today by FTR, the tape recording system. But that's okay. We do that in a number of civil cases, and it'll work out fine. And it's also by your consent, someone had wanted this to be, the tutorial to be recorded. I think other judges in the country are interested in it, and so they wanted to see what you have to say. So someday a judge in a distant part of the United States may say, well, you didn't say that on the tape. What you said on the tape was X. Now you're saying Y, so be careful. This is going to be used in other cases. All right, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor. I'm actually here simply to make an introduction of Ryan McGee from Morgan & Morgan, who is going to kick off the presentation. And I just wanted to reiterate, we welcome the opportunity to educate the court and to answer whatever questions you have throughout the course of today.
Excellent.
So thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, so please come forward. And your name again?
Ryan McGee, again with Morgan & Morgan.
All right.
And Your Honor, I have printed out hard copies of the slide deck as well as executive summaries and CVs for the two experts that we'll be calling today.
Okay.
If Your Honor would like those, I do have copies for opposing counsel, the clerk.
Well, go ahead and give me whatever you think in the easiest way that you feel is going to help.
And Judge, we're going to begin the presentation with Ms. Mary France. She has over 28 years of experience in the cybersecurity field. She is the CEO of Enterprise Knowledge Partners, LLC. She has served as an expert in numerous data breach cases. She's also a certified ethical hacker. She conducts penetration testing, and she's an information systems auditor, and her CV and summary have been submitted for the court today. And Ms. France will be addressing the personally identifiable information, the value of that personally identifiable information, and the industry standard practices to protect against hacking.
All right. Great.
And that will be followed by Mr. Strebe, and I'll introduce him with his credentials.
Okay, now let's have her come forward. She can stand right where you are. She doesn't have to be on the witness stand, or did you propose to do that?
We spoke yesterday with your court personnel, and they indicated the witness stand, but whatever works for Your Honor.
Well, this doesn't have to be under oath. This is just a tutorial. I don't propose that it be under oath. If you want to do it under oath, okay, but I feel, is that all right with both sides? All right.
That's fine, Your Honor.
All right, so the expert can come forward. Still, I expect her to tell me the truth. I know she will. She can stand right there and be the professor as opposed to the witness. Unless you want to do it a different way, I'm okay. I can absorb it any way you feel is best.
I think it'll be easiest if she sits at the witness stand.
All
She'll
right,
have access to this.
Please take the witness stand. But again, this does not need to be under oath. So you testify as if you were a witness, but this is not an evidentiary hearing. This is a tutorial. So welcome to the court. Say your name again and use the microphone, please.
Mary France.
F-R-A-N-T-Z.
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 Yes.
Okay, welcome, and counsel, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. Now, Ms. France, one of the first topics that we've been asked to speak about today and educate with the tutorial is personally identifiable information. And I'd like you to start off with a general explanation for the court, what's meant by personal identifiable information.
Personally identifiable information in general are a series of data elements that can be combined that uniquely distinguish any one individual to the point where they can be contacted or found. And there are statutory standards by state as well as under the National Institute for Standards of Technology, the FTC, et cetera, where they have certain data elements like first and last name, address, et cetera. And California has their own version that is slightly more comprehensive than the standard.
All right. I can hear you perfectly fine, but does everyone in the courtroom, can everyone hear okay? Everyone's indicating yes. All right. Thank you. Good.
And we've provided the definition, but I'd like you to discuss the difference between what you call historical, or excuse me, what's referred to as historical and temporary personally identifiable information.
Okay, so the context is basically how it can be used and the value of it. So as from a hacking standpoint, we look at whether the personally identifiable information from an individual has a long or short life based upon its use and value and who can find it. So, for instance, temporary, what we call in our industry, temporary PII is something that can be changed fairly easily. It doesn't mean that it's any less disruptive to an individual should it be taken. It just means that it has more or less the ability for the individual to control it. So something like a credit card. You find out your credit card was hacked, you can go get a new one. You can change a bank account, things like that. So that have limited life, so to speak, in its value. Things that are historical are things you can't change, things about you that you can't change, such as your mother's maiden name, your employment history. Your Social Security number can be changed, but it's incredibly difficult, so that usually sits within the historical aspect. Information about you that is that determines who you are, you can be identified by it, and you're stuck with it for your entire life. That has a much higher value, and that's what we call historical PII.
What was that first one called? Historical versus the earlier one was the temporary.
We call it temporary,
Temporary, okay.
or maybe a limited life. The other one has more of a long or sometimes even infinite life.
Okay. All right.
And diving a little bit deeper into the value of personally identifiable information, can you explain what's meant by the term of FULZ, F-U-L-L-Z?
Well, FULZ is a slang term that we kind of use in the industry also, that's meant to say almost like a dossier on you of when, on the individual, of when we've actually gained a whole bunch of information that allows somebody to potentially create a complete doppelganger of you in the online world or even in the physical world. It also
What was
has
that word? Doppel?
a duplicate of you, so they could basically create your identity. It's not you, so they're creating a false identifier or a duplicate of you.
Someone did that to me. They created a fake blog, is that the word? Where they said they pretended to be me talking about the Waymo case. I think most people realized it wasn't really me, but would that be a doppelganger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
Right.
So, they can go online, get a picture of you that is the original picture. They can get your information, your first and last name. They can get information about your behavioral traits, how you write, and then they can actually emulate that online and pretend they're you. Well, can you imagine what happens when people who don't know it's not you, and they can get fooled by that? So FULZ is a little bit more broad than that. It's basically a lot of different information put together. And the more information you have on any one entity, the more valuable it is, just because you have so much that it's really hard to dispute.
Okay. Next question.
And Ms. France, would you speak about the value of PII in general with regard to the interested parties?
Well, the highest value, again, is the FULZ or aggregated information, simply because I have so much information about you. I can actually use that to manipulate opinions, influence. I can use that as an ethical hacker to do a social engineering campaign in which I can actually perform phishing exploits, because I can do something that you're so comfortable with because I know you so well. So the more information you have on an individual. More than information that's gathered on an individual, the higher the value is on the market from a nefarious standpoint, obviously. And when you are able to take a huge history of an individual's behavior, particularly online, you can get comments that they've made, you can get who their friends are, you can achieve what they liked, what they clicked on, things that they purchased, and you put that all together in kind of a package. And it can be mined to the point where whoever has that information, it knows you better than you know yourself.
And can you explain how that applies to something like challenge responses?
Well, challenge response questions are usually formatted. So are you familiar with Your Honor? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. When you have some form of multi-factor authentication, so you don't just need a user ID and password, or when you forget a password, you can set up sometimes a series of questions.
Like your mother's maiden name.
Right.
Yeah, all right, I know what those are.
What street did you grow up on?
Right, exactly.
What was your first car? Things like that. Well, when somebody has FULS information, they can actually more easily, if not very accurately, answer those information on someone's behalf, and then be able to get into their systems. So challenge response is one of the easy ways that FULS is actually used.
All right.
And Ms. France, something we were asked to speak about is the dark web, but I'd like you to discuss the differences between the dark net and the dark web. Well,
as somebody in the industry, it's more or less a pet peeve of mine when the two get confused. But when somebody says the dark net, they're really talking about the underlying infrastructure, the machines, the relays, et cetera. And the dark web is the services that rely on top of that infrastructure. So you have a network, and then on top of that you have the browser. And the dark net and the dark web are based upon anonymity. Basically, it's used to protect the digital privacy of an individual so they can't be traced. It's used for both good and nefarious purposes. And the way the dark net works is a system of routers and relays, so that every single time somebody connects from point A to point B to get to a service, they actually bounce around quite a bit. The minimum is like 3 hops. So I'm going to connect to that machine, and that machine before I get to my source, and hence I obfuscate the trail. It's very hard to trace who I was when I started off. So that's the dark net. Is that way. It's a series of routers and relays, and the dark web is the services that rely on top of that, sort of like we see in our normal browsers. Services like email, secure email in this case, et cetera. And you can't really get to the dark net without using a browser or some sort of service that relies on top of it.
I don't get the difference between the dark net, which I understand what a router is, and relays and those things. But I don't understand the difference between the dark net routers and relays versus the ordinary ones that the regular internet uses. What is that difference?
The dark net actually uses the same infrastructure, but they use devices that are not registered or indexed or named, so to speak. So your regular internet, if you want to go to a website, a www.whatever, the reason why that naming convention is known is because it's been registered with a domain service, and you type in the address and you can find where you're going to, okay? The dark net physical infrastructure is a series of devices that aren't registered, they're not indexed, so to speak. You can set up your own relay on it. It's not hard to do from a technical perspective. But you don't name yourself, you don't say who you are. And so when you get into the dark web, into the browser, it's not like you can just Google something, okay, with look for a key term or something like that. You have to actually know where you're going. You have to know the actual address. And the addresses that you use in those browsers are not English-like. It's not like I want to look for Facebook, so I Google Facebook. It's I have to know the exact address, and the address is usually gibberish. It's actually a hash. So it's, you have to be fairly, you have to know where you're going and why you're getting there. Now, there are sites that have listings where you can find things because they've been gathered over time, but for the most part, it's meant for that anonymity. And it looks the same as the internet, except for, like I said, they're not registered, they're not indexed services. So you have to know what you're doing and you have to know where you're going.
Why does anyone want to be, why would anyone want an address that's just a hash number?
Well, if you're from a country that has a lot of censorship and you want to get, you want to be able to do what everybody else does on the internet, you want to be able to communicate and collaborate just like you would the free net or the public internet, then the method of the dark web and the dark net is to basically allow you those same services without being traced. So there's a lot of people that use the dark net and the dark web are not nefarious individuals.
So I had the vague idea that dark web was illegal, but you're telling me, no, it's not illegal.
No, it's actually developed by the U.S. government, actually.
Okay.
When the internet first got started, they wanted a way to be able to use the collaboration capabilities of the concept of the internet without having their information be available to the public.
Ms. France, could you speak a little bit about how the dark web is used to traffic stolen data and stolen information?
Well, again, that's the anonymity piece and the lack of digital, being able to trace you. So it's enveloped based upon digital privacy. And they would use that so they can traffic without being caught. So if I steal something from you and I don't want you to trace who I am, I'm going to go to the dark web and try to find a buyer for it, that sort of thing, and hope that I'm doing it in a way, because there are ways on the dark web to be caught, but hope that I'm doing it in a way that I can still get that information and trade it and buy and sell using the currency of Bitcoin, and you can't see who I am.
Excuse me. I'd like to move on. We briefly discussed it, but have a little more of a discussion of how personally identifiable information is misused with